Joe, she has, and she's trying to speak with jurors right now because that guilty verdict was announced within minutes. But while she's doing that, here's a quick refresher. Nathaniel Davenport is the 27-year-old who was found guilty of 9-year-old Zion Person in 2019. Davenport was found guilty on all federal charges, including and racketeering. Person was getting snow cones with his family when the SUV they were in was shot at. And that's because Davenport's gang, the 83 Babies, were targeting their rivals. And he was under the impression they were in the SUV.
Talking about me doing an interview with 83 Babies, and you were going to do an interview as well. And we're going to get through all that. And then the news broke that Lil Tony was arrested for a shooting. I guess a 9-year-old boy got killed, another 8-year-old boy got injured. 83 Babies actually issued a statement on their Instagram saying Lil Tony will no longer be a part or associated with the group.
Antonio Nathaniel Davenport Jr., better known as Lil Tony, was an emerging hip-hop artist from Durham, North Carolina, and a member of the rap trio 83 Babies, a group whose name referenced the Eight Trey Gangster Crips. To many, he appeared to be a budding rap star, having just signed a recording contract with Forever Rich Records, an imprint of Atlantic Records, and begun touring with the group in 2019. Davenport often spoke about dreaming of rap stardom since the age of 9, and as Lil Tony, he projected the image of a gritty street artist with music that frequently referenced gang culture, firearms, and violence. Yet behind the music career that seemed poised for success, prosecutors later revealed Davenport's deep ties to gang activity, and in 2019, those two worlds collided in devastating fashion when his actions led to the tragic death of 9-year-old Zion Person, a crime that ended a child's life and derailed Davenport's own future. Federal investigators identified Antonio Davenport as a member of the Eight Trey Gangster Crips, a criminal street gang based in Durham. In court, prosecutors testified that members of the Eight Trey, including Davenport and his co-defendant Derek Dixon, were involved in drug trafficking, violent assaults, and other criminal activity. Davenport's rap group, 83 Babies, took its name directly from the gang 83, standing for Eight Trey, and many of their songs openly referenced gang life and violence. At the time of the shooting, Davenport and his associates were reportedly caught up in an ongoing gang feud in Durham. In October 2020, he was formally charged under the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, with prosecutors alleging that he held a role within the Eight Trey and that the group engaged in acts of racketeering, including deletion, firearms offenses, drug distribution, and intimidation. Court records also show that Davenport had prior felony convictions dating back to 2016. On the night of the crime in August 2019, he was wearing a court-ordered electronic ankle monitor, which later provided investigators with tracking data that placed him at the scene.
Zion Person's loved ones clap after his accused gets no bond. Police say that man, Nathaniel Davenport, fired into a car the 9-year-old was in back in August. Him. Prosecutors say 24-year-old Davenport is a known gang member. His record shows ongoing charges of domestic violence, child abuse, drugs, and more. He's also been convicted of burglary in the past. I found he's a local rapper, going by Lil Tony. His music videos flaunt guns and violence.
It feel like I've been shooting a minute now.
An official word. Now Davenport facing life in prison and spending his day today in a federal courtroom in Greensboro. But this morning, Davenport having an outburst in the courtroom, according to NNO crime reporter Virginia Bridges. Davenport verbally attacking prosecutors, saying, quote, "that blank don't know what the blank she talking about." Davenport had to be removed from court, and proceedings were in recess until this afternoon.
On the evening of August 18, 2019, 27-year-old Antonio Davenport and two fellow members of the Eight Trey Gangster Crips, Derek Lamont Dixon Jr. and Deval Paco Magwood Jr., set out on what prosecutors later described as a drive-by shooting mission. The attack was meant to be an act of retaliation. Just days earlier, Davenport had been assaulted and publicly humiliated by rival gang members at the streets at South Point Mall in Durham, where security cameras captured him being chased and having his jewelry stolen. In the aftermath, Davenport and his associates exchanged threats with rivals on social media. That night, Davenport drove his burgundy Honda Accord through North Durham with Dixon and Magwood as passengers. When they came upon a green SUV stopped at the intersection of Leon Street and North Duke Street, they believed it belonged to one of the rivals involved in the earlier altercation. In reality, the vehicle was driven by 9-year-old John Person's aunt, Danielle Ragland, and carried John along with other children. Mistaking the SUV for a target, Davenport and Dixon opened fire, unleashing at least 22 rounds into the car. Davenport used a 9 handgun while Dixon fired a .40 caliber pistol. 2 bullets tore through the window where Zion was seated. The child was struck and met his demise instantly. His 8-year-old cousin, sitting beside him, was shot in the arm but survived. After the barrage, the shooters sped away. Investigators later recovered a 9 pistol hidden in Davenport's girlfriend's vehicle. Forensic testing linked it to the fatal shot. For the victims, the attack came without warning. Ragland later testified that Zion had been leaning out of the back window chatting with friends in another car, and that she had just told him to sit back inside when the gunfire erupted. While police initially considered whether someone in Ragland's car had been the intended target, evidence ultimately showed that the demise was a tragic case of mistaken identity. Davenport and Dixon had believed the SUV carried a rival gang member they were seeking revenge against. Investigators quickly pieced together evidence tying Davenport to the crime. Surveillance cameras showed his vehicle following the SUV before the shooting. His court-ordered ankle monitor confirmed his car's location at the scene. Davenport himself admitted that he had repainted his Honda from burgundy to black in the hours after the attack, fearing it would link him to the demise. Combined with ballistics evidence, prosecutors concluded that Davenport fired the fatal shots, even though he later claimed at trial that he was not the gunman.
A wake for a 9-year-old boy who was shot and killed in Durham is just getting underway ahead of his funeral tomorrow.
Zion Person's family says he was on the way to get ice cream with his family when he was shot. Last night, neighbors gathered for a vigil in the area where he died a week ago. They're urging anyone who knows anything about the crime to come forward. Zion's grandmother has a similar plea.
2 men that have been charged in this case will be serving the rest of their lives in prison. They've both received 2 life sentences concurrently to be served, as well as 10 years for federal gun charges. I kind of want to go ahead and walk you up to this point on what happened earlier today, in which Davenport was in that Greensboro courtroom early this morning, and those proceedings had to be paused for much of the day after an outburst in that courtroom. He lashed out verbally against the prosecutors, saying that blank does not know what she is talking about.
The investigation into the demise of 9-year-old Zion Person began as a local police matter in Durham, but within months federal prosecutors assumed control, pursuing the case under RICO statutes due to its gang-related elements. On October 27, 2020, Antonio Lil Tony Davenport, along with C defendants Derek Dixon and Chandra Magwood, was indicted. In May 2021, Derek Dixon pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy and deletion in aid of racketeering. Davenport, however, chose to stand trial in federal court in Greensboro in June 2022. On July 7, 2022, a jury found him guilty on all counts. 1 count of violent crime in aid of racketeering, along with 2 firearm charges for using a gun during a violent crime and causing death. At sentencing on October 4, 2022, U.S. District Judge William Osteen Jr. imposed a life sentence for the deletion charge with an additional 10 years for the firearms counts, to be served consecutively. The judge cited Davenport's long criminal record, which stretched back to his teenage years and included burglary, larceny, and fleeing police, while also stressing the particularly brutal nature of the crime. Dixon likewise received a life sentence, and Davenport was ordered to pay restitution to the victim's family. Following his sentencing, Davenport filed an appeal. In February 2025, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit upheld both his conviction and his life sentence, rejecting his arguments and affirming the trial court's judgment. With this ruling, Davenport is expected to remain in federal custody for the rest of his life. Despite his repeated claims of innocence, the courts concluded that the evidence against him was overwhelming. The final outcome marked not only the end of Davenport's short-lived music career, but also a tragic reminder of the devastating cost of gang violence that claimed the life of a child. The story of Antonio "Lil Tony" Davenport is both tragic and cautionary. What began as the promise of a music career fueled by talent and ambition instead spiraled into a life dominated by crime, gang allegiance, and ultimately, violence. The federal convictions and life sentence handed down to Davenport ensured he will spend the rest of his days behind bars, far from the stages he once aspired to perform on. More importantly, the case left an unhealable wound on the Durham community, particularly for the family of John Person, whose young life was cut short in a senseless act of mistaken identity. In the end, the legacy of Lil Tony serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly dreams can be destroyed when entangled with street life, and how the cost of violence always reaches far beyond those who pull the trigger.